I pressed play, and my boss's secret messages echoed through the boardroom. Everyone froze. And what happened next? My name is Claire. I'm 34 years old. And this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. Before I continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The conference room always had this fake calm about it, a stillness that tried too hard to look professional. The glass table reflected every fluorescent light above us, catching fingerprints and smudges from a week's worth of impatient meetings and cheap pastries. I could see my own outline in it when I sat down, the faint silhouette of someone who already knew what the next hour was going to feel like. The wall clocks ticked with that sharp, hollow rhythm you only notice when you're already tense, almost as if they were mocking the time we kept wasting on people who didn't deserve authority in the first place. And that day, even before anyone said a word, the air had that heavy, static weight, like a storm cloud waiting to crack open inside 4 beige walls. The smell of the hotel coffee hit me first. It always did. They ordered it in bulk because it saved a few dollars, never mind the fact that it tasted like burnt rubber filtered through warm plastic. Someone had set 3 carafes on the counter, the lids barely closed, steam curling out like a warning. I poured myself half a cup earlier, hoping the caffeine would settle my nerves. It didn't. It tasted metallic, like something scorched, and when the bitterness hit the back of my throat, it only deepened that empty feeling in my stomach, the kind that made it impossible to decide whether you were hungry or sick or both. People trickled in with that sluggish Monday morning energy, even though it was a Thursday. Todd came in, tapping his pen against his palm like he needed the noise to stay alive. His knee bounced when he sat down, a nervous habit he insisted was strategic focus. Marissa leaned over to Julia, whispering about her new beach photos, even though I'd already scrolled past them the night before. Her voice pitched higher every time she tried to pretend she wasn't bragging. Someone from HR walked in adjusting her blazer, tugging at the collar as if she was already preparing for the sweat she knew these meetings brought out in everyone. Papers shuffled, chairs scraped, muted greetings drifted around with that half-hearted politeness people force when they're trying to look like a team. And then he walked in. Wes, my boss, the regional manager who loved being the first to speak and the last to be questioned. He moved with that fake confidence, a practiced smoothness like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. He gave that politician's smile he used for clients, the one where the corners of his mouth lifted but nothing behind his eyes shifted even a millimeter. His tie was perfectly centered, his shirt freshly pressed, his hair combed back with the same precision he used to hide the truth. He looked like a man who believed every room existed just to applaud him. Everyone had heard the rumors. Everyone. Nashville wasn't big enough to hide secrets behind closed blinds and locked doors. People talked. They always talked. But none of it came from me. I didn't need to stir anything. The whispers had their own legs. They moved through hallways and elevator rides and late afternoon Slack messages with little winks and, "Have you heard?" They didn't know half of it. Not the part that mattered. Not the part I found out that morning. He stood at the head of the table like nothing in the world had brushed against him, like he hadn't been sleeping with a junior analyst, like he hadn't been slipping into hotel rooms during conferences with a woman who looked at him like a fast track to promotions, like he hadn't left a digital breadcrumb trail so sloppy a teenager with a cracked iPhone could have caught him. He believed that silence meant safety, that if I didn't confront him, there was no problem, that if he smiled hard enough, the truth would shrink. He didn't know what I knew. I came in early that morning, mostly because I wanted a moment of quiet before the circus began. The room was empty. The lights hummed, and on the screen in the top right corner, a tiny Bluetooth icon blinked. I leaned in, squinting, connected to Wes' iPhone, still synced, still active. The moment I saw it, something in my chest stilled, like the universe had decided to pause and tilt my head in exactly the direction I needed to look. I didn't plan anything at first. I just stared at the name like it was a joke he didn't realize he'd written for himself. And then I remembered his smug little comment during my second week here, the one about how he practiced reading his emails out loud so his voice would land better in meetings. He'd said it while leaning against the doorframe like he was blessing me with wisdom, At the time, I brushed it off. But now it felt like a breadcrumb I wasn't supposed to ignore. I clicked into the shared drive, the folder no one bothered checking because it was supposed to be for regional prep materials, which usually meant outdated templates and mislabeled spreadsheets. But right near the top was a file named Q3Try Prep Bot Audio. I hovered my cursor over it, my pulse tightening, that small part of me wondering if I was about to prove everyone wrong, or everyone right. I clicked play. His voice filled my headphones instantly, close and smooth in that way he probably thought sounded seductive. But it wasn't a quarterly report, not even close. He was reading, but not business updates. He was reading text messages, slowly, almost theatrically, like each sentence was a line in a script he wanted to memorize. Can't stop thinking about you under that red dress in Denver. Next time, no hotel room, my office, door, locked. I froze. The words sank slow and heavy, like someone pouring syrup across the inside of my mind. I replayed the clip because I needed to be sure. Then I scrolled. There were 5 more files. 5. Each one labeled just unsuspiciously enough. Each one his voice. Each one a confession wrapped in polished tone. She was sitting 4 chairs away from me now. Caitlin, 26, freshly promoted, always offering to stay late, always smiling with that glossed lip confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Her perfume hovered in the air like she wanted people to follow it, and she looked calm this morning, too calm for someone who'd heard the rumors, too calm for someone who didn't know her whole world was about to shift. They weren't subtle, they thought they were, but they weren't. Once I understood what the files were, I didn't hesitate. I dragged one to the desktop, renamed it, sat down, waited. The clock struck 9:03, the exact time Wes liked to commence discussions for optimum productivity. And just as he said his line, I tapped my laptop and selected Project Audio. A blue bar blinked on the screen as the connection established, the room silent except for the click of my finger. Connected to Wes' iPhone. And then his voice filled the room. Can't stop thinking about you under that red dress. Every sound in the conference room stopped. Chairs stilled. Coffee mugs hovered midair. Someone inhaled too sharply. Even the ceiling fan seemed to hang in place, suspended by the shock that spread like a cold wave across the table. I didn't look at him. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the screen, on the moving blue bar, watching each second drag his lies into the open. The room tightened with every sentence. You make Mondays worth coming in for. I'll find a way to approve your promotion. Discreetly. Let them guess. They're too slow to matter. Julia gasped. HR stood so abruptly that her chair crashed to the floor, echoes bouncing off the walls like a gavel hitting wood. Wes scrambled for the remote, fingers fumbling, breath shallow. But the system belonged to him. His phone, his connection, his voice. He had armed the very trap he'd fallen into. I let the audio finish, every second, every word. I watched the truth land on everyone like dust settling after an explosion. And when the clip ended, the silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. I finally lifted my gaze. Wes looked drained, colorless, like someone had unplugged him from the wall. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. HR didn't wait. Wes, we need to talk. Privately. Now. She didn't even look at me. She just walked to the door like the decision had already been made. And he followed because he had no other option. I closed my laptop, the click loud in the quiet that remained. I stood, straightened my cardigan. It felt like armor. And as I walked toward the door, no one stopped me. No one whispered. No one questioned what I'd done, because the truth had spoken for itself. He wanted everyone to hear his authority, so I let them hear his truth. I didn't go home right away. I didn't cry in my car or scroll through LinkedIn looking for new jobs. Instead, I walked down to the tiny park 2 blocks from the office. It was muscle memory at that point. Whenever things felt too loud inside those beige walls, I'd step outside and let the wind make decisions for me. It was warm for a Tennessee autumn, a kind of gentle warmth that felt like the season hadn't made up its mind yet. Golden leaves scraped across the sidewalk like secrets no one wanted to hold, dragging along the concrete in slow, soft arcs. Every gust of wind pushed them closer to my feet, whispering across the ground like they knew what I had just done. I sat on a metal bench that had probably been there longer than the office building itself. The seat was cold, not painfully so, but enough to remind me I was outside the world that expected me to keep my voice down. A kid stood a few yards away, chasing pigeons with a half-eaten Pop-Tart in his hand, strawberry filling smeared across his fingers. Every time he lunged forward, the pigeons hopped back just enough to stay out of reach. He laughed without hesitation, the kind of pure, unfiltered joy adults forget how to imitate. Watching him made my shoulders unclench a little. It felt grounding, like a reminder that everything terrible eventually shrinks back down to size. And I waited. Not for a call, not for fallout, just for my own heartbeat to slow down. It was beating so hard it felt like it lived in my throat instead of my chest. My hands weren't shaking, not really, but they felt too light, like adrenaline had hollowed out my muscles and left only static behind. Part of me wanted to replay the scene in my head, but the other part wanted the stillness so badly I didn't even let myself blink too fast. 10 minutes passed before I heard the faint vibration in my bag. I pulled out my phone and saw her name. Caitlin. Caitlin. What the hell did you do? I stared at the message like it was a piece of trash someone had dropped at my feet. I didn't reply. I didn't even open the conversation at first. A pigeon fluttered onto the back of the bench and tilted its head at me like it wanted to hear my answer. Another vibration. Caitlin, you just ruined his career. Ruined, as if he hadn't been swinging the hammer at his own reputation for months, as if I had conjured the words myself. The third text arrived before I finished that thought. Caitlin, we could have handled this like adults. I laughed out loud, a sharp, surprised laugh that startled the pigeon off the bench. The sound didn't feel forced. It felt like air breaking free from somewhere deep. I tucked my phone away because I knew if I kept reading, she'd send the kind of self-pitying paragraphs that only made things worse. Handled it like adults. She meant quietly. She meant secretly. She meant burying it. Like misconduct was something you shake off with a closed-door apology and a warning that never gets written down. She meant protect him. But I was done with quiet. The wind shifted, brushing hair against my cheek, and I leaned back on the bench. The warmth, the leaves, the sound of the kids' shoes scraping against the concrete, it all pulled memories out of me without permission. Let me tell you how I got here. 2 years ago, I was promoted to senior project manager, not because anyone handed it to me, not because of luck, not because of who I smiled at or who I avoided. I earned it. 12-hour days, crisis calls at midnight, performance metrics that had to be triple-checked because one decimal off meant a meeting with the regional director. I had notebooks full of calculations, laptops full of slide decks, weekends littered with sticky notes no one else would ever see. Wes used to praise me, always in private. A quiet, good job in the hallway when no one was looking. You really saved us today, murmured while passing me a stack of files. But in meetings, it became, the team did great work. And the team, as far as he was concerned, was him. His name, his reputation, his spotlight. I let it go at first because I told myself it was just leadership politics, that maybe giving him credit was a way to keep the department running smoothly, that maybe, at some point, the recognition would circle back to me. Months passed. Nothing circled back. Then came Caitlin. Young, energetic, fresh out of grad school with a resume full of internships that looked shinier than they were. She was sharp in a way people misinterpreted as brilliance, when really it was adaptability. She studied the room like she was studying a language. She learned who liked compliments and who liked to feel needed. She learned who wanted bright smiles and who wanted soft apologies. She handed both out like business cards. The first time I saw her leave his office, I knew. I don't mean I suspected. I mean I knew. Her lip gloss was a little smudged, Not messy enough to give anything away to an untrained eye, but I had been a woman in a man's workplace long enough to recognize the signs of someone using charm as currency. And Wes's tie, just slightly loosened, just uneven enough, looked like it had been tugged by someone who didn't understand how expensive silk shifts. That was the beginning. He started rerouting projects through her. He gave her approvals I waited weeks for. She got licensed to speak in meetings where I could barely get through a sentence without interruption. She presented slides I created. She fielded questions about data I had collected. She stood at the front of the room with my work in her hands and answered as if she had done it herself. But the part that hollowed me out wasn't the favoritism. It wasn't even the dishonesty. It was the way he started correcting me. Wes, Claire, I don't think that's quite accurate. Me, that's the data from last week's report. Wes, well, Caitlin has more updated figures. He said it in front of the entire team. No eye contact, no recognition of where the numbers had come from, just dismissal. Erasure disguised as leadership, and every time it happened, the air in the room shifted. People glanced at me with sympathy they didn't think I could see. Some looked relieved it wasn't happening to them. Others looked bored, like a woman being minimized was just background noise. I started feeling like a ghost at my own desk. A ghost who wrote project plans no one would remember. A ghost who watched other people collect praise for work they hadn't touched. A ghost who fed spreadsheets into the system like sacrifices to someone else's success story. I never cried, not in public. But one night, after staying late to fix a report Caitlin had botched, I sat in my car and stared at my hands for almost an hour. They were trembling so hard the steering wheel blurred. Not from sadness, from fury. A deep, bone-heavy fury that tasted like metal and exhaustion. Because I knew I was being replaced in slow motion. And everyone was watching it happen like it was a weather update. HR was the breaking point. I documented everything. The slide deck swap, the mismatched metrics, the way approvals appeared instantly for her and sat untouched for me. And when I walked in with a folder full of inconsistencies, they gave me the kind of expression people reserve for toddlers complaining about monsters in their closet. HR. Claire, we understand your concerns, but unless you have evidence of misconduct, we can't act on assumptions. Assumptions. They called my reality an assumption because it wasn't delivered in a man's voice, because I was tired instead of charming, because I didn't flirt, because I didn't soften my words. So, I waited, I watched, and when fate handed me that blinking Bluetooth icon, still synced, still arrogant, I didn't hesitate. I didn't leak photos. I didn't send anonymous emails. I didn't post screenshots or create drama. I let his voice speak the words he thought no one would ever hear. That's the thing about people like Wes. They truly believe consequences are optional. They think charm is immunity. They think leadership is invisibility. But Bluetooth doesn't care about charm. It just plays what it's told. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again, this time from a number saved in my contacts under corporate HR. I walked back to the office, breathing slowly, taking each step like I needed the ground to confirm it was still solid. They put me in the smaller conference room, the HR fishbowl with too many fake ferns and a box of tissues no one ever touched unless they were being terminated. HR manager. Claire. Can you tell us what happened this morning? Me. You heard what I heard. HR manager. Did you intentionally connect his device? Me. I played the file. His device was already connected. Silence, a long stretch of it. A pen tapped once, twice. HR manager. Are you aware that his employment is now under review? Me. I'm aware he compromised company policy. And my work. More silence. This time uneasy. Not because they didn't understand, because they did. They didn't threaten me. They couldn't. Too many witnesses. Too many gasps. Too many murmured, "Oh my gods." Later that day, another text came through. Wes, I hope you're proud of yourself. I didn't answer. But inside, where my voice had been quiet for too long, I finally heard myself clearly. I'm not proud. I'm just finally visible. That week, everything changed, just not in the way people expected. The shift didn't announce itself with a dramatic email or emergency meeting. It arrived quietly, like a draft sneaking under a closed door. When I walked into the office the next morning, something felt off immediately, a kind of emptiness hanging in the air. It took me a moment to name it. Then I realized. Wes didn't show up. His office door was still there, nameplate untouched, but the blinds were drawn tight, the kind of shut that told you no one had touched them since the night before. Normally, he kept them half open so everyone could see how busy he was. But now, nothing. No out-of-office reply, no email to explain an emergency, no sudden calendar block labeled client review, just silence. The kind of silence that made you wonder if something had detonated quietly while everyone was asleep. And the tension. God, the tension. You could taste it in the air. It was like the whole building was holding its breath, waiting to see who would speak first. The whispers didn't stay small. They grew louder, slipping between cubicles, tumbling down hallways, echoing across the break room whenever someone refilled their coffee. Not loud enough to be obvious, just loud enough that people stopped pretending they didn't know what happened. The atmosphere felt strange, charged, the way fluorescent lights buzz right before they die. That faint, flickering hum you can't unhear once it sinks into your brain. That was the office now. Conversations cut off sharp whenever I walked by. Not out of judgment, not out of pity, but something closer to awe. Like they were looking at someone who had survived a fire they didn't know was burning until the smoke cleared. People looked at me differently. Their eyes lingered longer, not on my clothes or my expression, but on something underneath, something they hadn't bothered to see before. Some gave small nods as I passed, subtle signs of respect that didn't need words. A junior intern, someone I'd barely spoken to, left a post-it on my monitor. A small yellow square that said, "For what it's worth." Thank you. The handwriting was shaky, like she was afraid someone might see her leave. That tiny note did something to me. Something quiet. It made me realize the shift wasn't just external. It was internal too, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't disappearing. I wasn't fading into other people's presentations or becoming invisible behind my own work. I wasn't the ghost at the end of the conference table. I was the one with the story now, and they all knew it. HR called me again on Thursday. The moment I saw their extension pop up, I felt the familiar twist in my stomach, expecting the same controlled tone from before. But when I answered, their voice was different. Softer, careful, almost deferential. HR manager. Claire, we want to make sure you feel safe, that you're supported in this transition. Me. Is it a transition or just a waiting game? HR manager. Wes has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. We're conducting interviews. I tilted my head, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable. Me. Does that include the analyst he was mentoring? HR manager. We're speaking with everyone. Everyone. A vague word that sounded like inclusion but felt like evasion. They weren't saying her name. They weren't acknowledging her role in any of this. Her story was still being protected, shielded behind HR vocabulary and neutral tone, and that bothered me. Not because I wanted her humiliated. I didn't want revenge on her. I didn't want to drag her through the mud or watch her fall apart in a meeting room. But she still got to smile in the break room like nothing happened. She still logged her hours. She still answered calls. She still got included in meetings and emails and everything she'd been handed because of him. She hadn't lost sleep. She hadn't lost footing. She had just lost the shortcut. And shortcuts like hers usually came with backup plans. Friday afternoon, I found an envelope on my desk. Plain white, no return address, just my name in ballpoint pen. The handwriting was rushed, almost frantic, like someone didn't want to be seen holding it. I looked around, trying to figure out who had placed it there. No one made eye contact. No one looked suspicious. The whole office carried on as if the envelope had just materialized on its own. I slid a finger under the flap and opened it. Inside was a printout of an email from Wes, sent to upper management, dated 2 weeks before the quarterly meeting. My eyes scanned the text slowly, each line landing with a heavier weight than the one before it. He accused me of interpersonal conflicts, difficulty adapting to new team dynamics, resistance to mentorship restructuring. In other words, he was laying the groundwork to get rid of me, quietly, professionally, before I could ever defend myself, before the truth ever had a chance to surface. My hands shook, but not from shock, not even from anger, from validation, from that deep, burning confirmation that everything I'd sensed was real, that the gaslighting hadn't been imagined, that the erasure hadn't been paranoia. I took the letter straight to HR. I didn't knock. I just walked in, placed it on the table, and slid it across the glass. The HR manager picked it up and read it, her face tightening with each sentence. She looked at it like it was a live wire, like touching it too long might burn her fingers. HR manager, where did you get this? Me. Someone wanted me to see it. HR manager, this changes the scope of our review. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I didn't offer explanations. I didn't speculate. I didn't point fingers. They didn't need me to. The dots were already there. All they had to do was connect them. Wes wasn't just morally compromised. He wasn't just unprofessional. He wasn't just recklessly involved with someone he supervised. He was strategically malicious. He had been planning my removal for weeks, maybe months, trying to erase me before I became a threat, trying to tidy up the mess he had created by sweeping me under the rug. Well, he failed. The next week, Caitlin was reassigned. Not publicly, not with any announcement, but her calendar changed. No more leadership tasks, no more client calls, no more meetings with senior management. They moved her back into the standard analyst rotation, the kind of schedule she would have had if she hadn't taken that shortcut. She passed me near the coffee station one morning, her steps tight, brittle. She held her mug like she wanted to crush it. Caitlin, are you happy now? Me. No, but I'm done being quiet. She scoffed, a sharp, defensive sound that didn't reach her eyes. And her eyes, those were different now. The smugness was gone. The certainty was gone. What replaced them was fear. Fear of consequences. Fear of being seen without the shield he had given her. Fear of realizing that once the protection disappears, the truth has nowhere to hide. Because she knew. She hadn't just lost a relationship, she lost power. And in an office like ours, where everything is politics and perception, protection is everything. A month passed. His office stayed dark. His door stayed shut. The blinds untouched. Eventually, his nameplate vanished overnight. No goodbye email, no last meeting, no carefully curated farewell message thanking everyone for their support. Just absence. A chapter quietly deleted. People avoided saying his name like it carried bad luck. And I realized people don't mourn authority. They only mourn convenience. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, my inbox lit up with a company-wide memo. HR's header. A subject line with the words, Organizational Restructuring Update. My stomach tightened until I opened it. Effective immediately, Claire Adams will be assuming interim regional leadership during the restructuring phase. My name. In print. Across every inbox. Sent from HR, forwarded by department heads, quietly acknowledged by people who had spent months pretending not to see me. It felt surreal, but not surprising. Because once people see you hold power, even for a moment, they start rewriting your story for you. They start looking at you differently. They start treating your silence like strategy instead of surrender. They start calling you capable instead of dedicated. They start calling you leadership material instead of supportive. And for the first time, I didn't shrink from it. I didn't question whether I deserved it. I didn't apologize in my head for taking up space. I was finally ready to write my own story. I didn't change overnight, but my posture did. It was subtle at first, the way my shoulders settled differently when I walked into a room, or how my chin lifted a fraction higher when someone spoke to me. It wasn't confidence yet. More like recovery, like a muscle remembering what strength once felt like. The first time I walked into that boardroom as interim regional lead, I paused just long enough at the head of the table to remember what it used to feel like, sitting 3 seats down, watching him stand there, pretending the numbers I pulled were his triumphs. I remembered the way he'd grip the edge of the table, leaning forward like the entire department depended on his insight, the way he'd nod after presenting a metric I had calculated at 2 in the morning, the way people clapped for what they thought was leadership. But now it was my name on the slides, my reports, my results, my delivery. I clicked through each graph, each projection, each operational update, and nobody dared interrupt. Not to challenge me, not to clarify, not to take over the narrative. They listened, really listened. And I felt something settle in my chest, something that had been rattled loose for months. Authority, not borrowed, not tolerated, earned. The strangest part? No one apologized. Not HR, not the executives, not even Caitlin. They just adapted. That's how survival works in places like this. People pivot fast, they rewrite alliances, they erase the past quietly, as if loyalty was never expected to begin with. They behave like everything is simply a transition, not a consequence. The people who once looked right through me now made room for me in the elevator. The ones who used to send last-minute requests now prefaced their emails with apologies and context. It wasn't respect, not at first. It was recalibration. The kind of sudden shift that happens when people realize they misjudged the direction the wind was blowing. But I didn't need their apologies. I didn't want them. I wanted my dignity back, and I'd already taken it. Still, I knew better than to relax. Corporate amnesia is dangerous. If you don't leave markers, they rewrite the story without you. They reshape the narrative into one that makes them comfortable. So, I documented everything: performance records, meeting transcripts, every task I assigned, every decision I made, every approval I granted, signed, dated, filed. Not because I planned to use it, not for revenge, for insurance. That was the version of power I believed in now. Not control, not intimidation. Just being undeniable, being so thoroughly recorded that no one could twist my work into theirs, being so meticulous that even the shadows had receipts. I didn't expect what came next. 2 months after Wes's exit, I received an email with a Chicago corporate logo I didn't recognize. Invitation to a leadership conference. Internal talent spotlight, they called it. A way to celebrate fresh voices in the regional structure. I reread the line 3 times before accepting. Celebrate fresh voices. For years, I had been the quietest one in the room out of necessity. Now, my voice was being invited, highlighted, handed a microphone. When I arrived in Chicago, the lobby of the convention hotel buzzed with the kind of energy you only feel when ambition and caffeine collide. People hurried across marble floors with rolling briefcases clacking behind them. Coffee carts steamed near the escalators, the smell of espresso cutting through the perfume and cologne of hundreds of attendees. Badges hung from lanyards in every color: regional, national, executive, partner. Everyone looked like they were performing efficiency, but one booth stopped me cold. It wasn't a vendor. It wasn't marketing. It wasn't even branded with our company. It was a recruitment table, and the banner behind it said, "Strategic Futures, Women in Corporate Accountability." The words landed in me like a dropped pin, precise, weighted, unignorable. I walked toward the booth without fully deciding to. A woman in her 40s, sleek ponytail, sharp blazer, the kind of posture that didn't crack under pressure, smiled at me. Her expression wasn't polite, it was knowing. I don't even remember what I asked her first. Something generic about the program, something I probably could have found on their website. But after 5 minutes of talking, her asking about my background, me giving careful, measured answers, she said something I didn't expect. "Recruiter, we've heard about you, the audio incident." Me: "I didn't think it was public." Recruiter: "It wasn't. But stories like that move in quiet circles, especially when they end with promotions." She handed me a card, silver foil, embossed. Heavy in a way business cards aren't supposed to be. It felt like a key. Recruiter: "If you ever want to build systems instead of just surviving them, call us." That night, in my hotel room, I stared at that card for hours. The rain smeared the windows, making downtown Chicago blur into abstract streaks of red and white. The city pulsed below, headlights sliding along wet pavement like veins lit from within. I sat on the corner of the bed, shoes still on, badge still around my neck, holding that card between my fingers. And I felt it again, the tremble in my hands. But this time, not from rage. Not from fear. From possibility. That quiet, dangerous kind of possibility that asks, what if the story isn't over? What if it's just beginning? But I didn't call her. Not right away. I wasn't done where I was. Not yet. Because there was still one thread left. One unfinished line in the narrative that pulled at me every time I thought about moving forward. Caitlin. She hadn't resigned, hadn't been fired, just shifted. They moved her to the back end of operations. No client-facing work, no leadership tasks, no visibility. She was still here, tucked into a quiet corner of the workflow like someone had dimmed the spotlight without turning it off completely. She became an echo of what she once thought she was becoming, and maybe that was worse for her than any formal consequence. One day we crossed paths in the elevator, just the two of us. The doors slid shut with that soft thud, sealing us into a narrow box of stillness. She didn't look up from her phone. Her hair was pulled back too tightly. Her shoulders stiffened in a way I recognized immediately, self-protection disguised as posture. I pressed the button for the 7th floor. She pressed nothing, which meant she was headed there too. The elevator hummed as it rose. She didn't say hello, didn't acknowledge me. But I could feel the static of her discomfort filling the space between us. And right before the doors opened, she muttered, just loud enough for the words to reach me. Caitlin, you act like you won. But nobody respects a woman who has to burn everything down to be seen. I smiled. Not cruelly, not triumphantly, just calm. The kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly who you are and who you no longer answer to. Me. Then why are you whispering? Her head snapped up a fraction, but her mouth didn't move. She didn't reply. She stepped out quickly, her heels clicking away with an urgency she couldn't disguise. Because she knew. Everyone knew. I hadn't burned the building down. I hadn't set fire to the foundation. I hadn't destroyed anything except the illusion that corruption was invisible. I'd turned the lights on and let the truth show itself. 3 months after that elevator ride, I left. Not in a burst of anger, not in a blaze of chaos, not with slammed doors or accusations thrown over my shoulder. I left quietly, intentionally, without a backward glance. Not out of fear, not because someone pushed me, not because the walls closed in. I left because I was done surviving in the same room where I was once erased. Done breathing recycled air that still carried the echoes of people who once pretended I wasn't there. Done sitting in chairs where I had watched my own work get repackaged in someone else's voice. I left because the chapter had finished writing itself, and it was time to stop editing a story that didn't deserve me anymore. You know what they never tell you about revenge? It doesn't always look like flames or headlines. It doesn't always come wrapped in spectacle or the satisfaction of watching something burn. Sometimes it looks like quiet exits, closed tabs, signed contracts. Sometimes it looks like a cardboard box with your name written on the side, and a better one waiting somewhere new. Sometimes revenge is simply deciding you're worth more than the room you were forced to shrink inside. When it came time to pack, I didn't take much. I walked through my office slowly, letting my eyes settle on the things I once clung to. The photos from company trips I organized but never got credit for. The plant I kept alive through 12-hour days and fluorescent lighting. The sticky notes with inside jokes that only made sense during the late nights we stayed to finish work that wasn't ours to fix. I picked up the ceramic mug I bought during my first year, the one with the tiny crack near the handle, the one no one else touched because everyone knew it was mine. I wrapped it gently in a conference tote bag and placed it in the box. Funny how objects become milestones, how the simplest things carry the weight of entire eras. When I walked out for the last time, the lobby felt different. Larger, somehow. Quieter. The security guard, the same man who watched hundreds of people come and go without ever stopping to look at their faces, held the door for me a little longer than usual. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. But he nodded, a small, steady nod that felt like a seal on the moment. Respect, expressed without ceremony. And for the first time in that building, respect was enough. Atlanta was a new story. A different skyline, a cleaner slate. I rented a small apartment with tall windows that let the morning light pour across the hardwood floors. The air felt lighter there, as if the city itself didn't expect me to apologize for taking up space. I joined a smaller firm, leaner team, sharper focus, but the mission was bigger, clearer. Here, I build systems, ones that don't crumble under the weight of ego, ones that can't be gamed by Bluetooth connections or whispered favors in closed offices, ones where mentorship isn't code for manipulation, and leadership isn't a synonym for entitlement. People say I'm tough. They say it with raised eyebrows during meetings. They say it when I reject half-baked proposals. They say it when I don't soften my voice to make truth easier to swallow. But they don't say it like it's a flaw anymore. They say it like it's earned, like it's armor, like it's the language of someone who survived the quiet kind of betrayal, the kind that hides behind politeness and performance reviews. The irony? Wes still hasn't resurfaced. Not really. I heard through a colleague that he tried to start a consulting group somewhere in the Midwest. Something vague, something forgettable. But reputations don't forget what LinkedIn can't show, and his was built on a foundation too thin to support the truth. You can run from a story, but you can't outrun the echo. As for Caitlin, someone told me she moved to Denver. HR, new company, new title. Maybe even a new narrative she's trying to draft for herself. Probably hoping no one Googles too deeply. Probably hoping the internet forgets faster than people do. I don't hate her. I never did. Hate implies she had the power to break something in me. She didn't break me. She just confirmed what I already knew. The people who rise fastest don't always stay. The ones who hold the floor are the ones who built it. Sometimes I wonder if she ever understood what really happened. Not the scandal, not the fallout, but the shift, the moment where everything inverted and the truth took center stage. Sometimes I think she believed I exposed him for her sake, or for mine. But the truth is simpler. I didn't do it for a moral victory, or to watch him collapse. I did it because silence was killing parts of me that no one even knew existed, and because truth has a way of unraveling quietly, whether you choose it or not. I've been asked more than once if I'd do it again, if I'd click Project Audio in that conference room, if I'd risk my job, my standing, my reputation just to let the truth speak. People ask it like they want me to say no, like they want reassurance that they wouldn't have to be that brave. But my answer is always the same. He wanted everyone to hear his authority, so I let them hear his truth, and I walked out, not as a woman who lost her temper, not as a woman who needed revenge to breathe, but as a woman who rewrote the rules, a woman who took back her narrative, a woman who made herself visible in a place that tried to blur her out. So if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.